Hi, I'm Ahmed. I'm Architect Mobility with Oracle's Identity and Management Group. Today I will be talking to you about developing and enforcing a BYOD policy. BYOD stands for Bring Your Own Device. It refers to corporate policy for allowing your employees to bring their own devices like smartphone and tablets and use them to access corporate information and run various business apps. Traditionally, the model used to be your company provides you with a phone that you use for work. As a result, people would carry two devices, one for personal and one for work. But nowadays, everyone carries a smartphone device and they want to use it for work. So smartphone and tablets are great productivity tools and are becoming indispensable for modern employee. But BYOD really poses a number of challenges for a company. There is expectation from these devices in terms of user experience, which really makes these devices so great, and how much freedom you can give your employees without ruining that user experience and really turning these devices into bricks. So there's several ways you can implement a BYOD policy, ranging from very restrictive to least restrictive. The real challenge is to find the right balance so your employees are encouraged to get more productive by using these devices, and at the same time your corporate security is not compromised and you make sure you have certain level of standard you can still enforce. So there's several approaches to BYOD. Approach number one, which could be considered BYOD 1.0, was to use an MDM. So in this first approach to BYOD, it was really about use an MDM and lock down the device. Now this allows an enterprise a great deal of control. It allows an enterprise to enforce what apps an employee can install on their device. Corporate policies can dictate various things like device level PIN, be able to lock and wipe, even if it's selective lock and wipe. Now this may work for some companies, but could also be an issue. I mean, it's your personal device and now your company dictates what you can do with it. They can lock, wipe, or prevent you from doing certain things. So that can really interfere with the great experience that people have come to expect from these devices and the freedom of really being creative and being productive using these devices. So the second approach to BYOD, which we consider as a MAM-based solution. So the key challenge really comes down to how you allow BYOD without having to control or lock down an employee's device. So the new approach to deploying BYOD is by using a MAM solution, which stands for Mobile Application Development. Now MAM solutions provide you the ability to only control your corporate apps. If an employee wants to install, let's say, Angry Birds, and it's their device and they should be able to, and corporate policies shouldn't interfere with it. So it's only when they want to access corporate information or want to access corporate apps is when you want your corporate policies to kick in and be able to put controls and restrictions on your corporate apps, on your corporate access. Now there are some key services a MAM should be able to provide to enable effective BYOD policy within your organization. And those are, you have to be able to provide access and authentication to the corporate apps that you're going to deploy. You have to be able to do single sign-on. You have to be able to secure the data, whether it's in transit or is at rest. You have to be able to selectively enforce policies on the apps, corporate apps, only corporate apps that the employee wants to access. Policies including DLP, which stands for Data Leakage Protection. That becomes a very key component of any BYOD policy. And also be able to support any kind of apps, whether you want to provide them access to web apps, native apps, hybrid apps, any kind of apps. These are the core services that you should be able to provide for all those kind of apps. Now let's talk a little bit more about each of these core services and why they're important. The access authentication I mentioned as the first core service. Now every enterprise app needs to connect to some backend services. Traditional approach is to put a VPN, but that poses challenges of exposing your enterprise network to these devices. Traditional approach is to put a VPN, but that poses challenges of exposing your enterprise network to these devices. And you have to worry about now putting all sorts of controls on the client side to make sure that any unwanted data or access is not provided through your corporate VPN. Now corporate services and data are sitting in your internal network. behind your firewall, or could be even sitting on cloud services. So exposing your data unprotected to devices would really make any security conscious company nervous. So your BYOD infrastructure needs to provide seamless access to your corporate data. It has to be authenticated access. So it should tie in with your existing identity frameworks instead of having a parallel identity infrastructure just to deploy your BYOD basically infrastructure. Now there will always be multiple apps, multiple corporate apps that employees want to use. And they shouldn't need to authenticate every single time they switch from one app to the other. Well, if they're in web app, they switch over to a native app, they go back to a hybrid app. Now there should be a seamless single sign-on between all these apps. Without that, the user experience really becomes difficult if we have to keep authenticating every time. So your BYOD infrastructure should allow single sign-on between any kinds of apps that you want to deploy on employees' personal devices, whether they're web apps, native apps, and hybrids like I mentioned. And another key point when you talk about authentication and single sign-on is that your password or your credentials should not be cached on the device. So that becomes a huge security threat if you're just storing the credentials and just replaying from there. So it's really the underlying how the access infrastructure is tied with your BYOD that allows you to seamlessly do true single sign-on from your corporate apps. That becomes a key important factor. Then one of the key aspects of any successful BYOD infrastructure is how it provides data security. Now this needs to be done independent of device security. So your users are not expected to, let's say, set device level pins for strong encryption. So if you set device level pin, then only your data gets encrypted, otherwise it doesn't. And without having complete control over the device, it's very difficult to expect user to be able to do that. I mean, you're just relying on them. So really data security should really be externalized. It should not rely on device level security or rely on certain actions the user is going to perform or certain actions that you expect app developers to perform. So it should really be externalized and be enforced as a common standard irrespective of which app you're trying to run with your BYOD program. And also the data in transit should always be encrypted. The moment data leaves the enterprise, it should be secure and stay secured regardless of being online or offline. You can enforce policies as sort of more a broad stroke, or for any successful BYOD policies, I mean, you have different apps, you have different users, and each would have different requirement on how restrictive or less restrictive the policies need to be. So you have to have ability to enforce policies dynamically on these applications that are running on the device. So a successful BYOD policy should allow various levels of control. I mean, based on users' privileges. I mean, this is something similar you do within an enterprise based on users' access and privileges. They're allowed to do certain things from apps, and they're restricted from doing certain things from the app. And when you take the same data all the way to mobile, it shouldn't be any different. Same users have a certain set of privileges, and they should be allowed to do certain things. And based on your user privileges, enterprises may want to allow them to perform certain actions or even block them. And also there should be strong set of DLP policies to control any and which way the data can be leaked out of enterprise apps that are sitting on these mobile devices. So the DLP becomes a very, very critical part of having a successful BYOD infrastructure. And examples of policies are like restricting open-in, allowing users to email content out of the app, printing, or in case of iOS, it could be even things like AirDrop, and you want to make sure you control all these different angles, all the different aspects how data can be leaked out. And then last but not the least, the BYOD infrastructure should give you freedom to provide these core services or enforce these core services on any kind of apps. All access, authentication, single sign-on, data security policies should be enforced on web apps, native apps, or hybrid apps. So your users can really benefit from all the cool different ways of accessing and different cool apps that are available within the enterprise without having to lock down the device, without putting so much restriction on the end user themselves. and only when they go into the corporate apps, whether they're web, hybrid, or native apps, is when they're faced with corporate policies and they have to comply with those policies. So that would be some of the key aspects that you need to consider when you want to deploy a successful BYOD policy. Thank you very much for watching this, and hope you find this useful.